So please join us. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. That's you.
I'm live.
So get out there, get active, tag. You're it. There's
awesome, great.
Dude, there's so much we have to do.
I'll pull up the Facebook right now.
It's coming up this year, and a big one coming up next year. Let's get ready. Have a great afternoon, and be good to yourself, the people around you. We'll see.
No worries. We got some in it.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like not muting yourself on a work Zoom call. If you're lucky, your coworkers just hear you yawn during a presentation. But what happens if your boss ever hears you talking about his receding hairline? Being careless can have some serious consequences. And that's why everyone needs to protect themselves when they go online with ExpressVPN. Internet service providers know every single website you visit, and they can sell this information to ad companies and tech giants who then use your own data to target you. But ExpressVPN reroutes your network data through a secure encrypted tunnel so your provider can't see or sell your online activity. ExpressVPN is so simple to use. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. It works on phones, laptops, even routers, so everyone who shares your Wi-Fi can be protected. The reason I never go online without ExpressVPN. No wonder it's been rated #1 by CNET and TechRadar. Protect your online privacy at expressvpn.com/Tom and get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/THOM. expressvpn.com/Tom.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
To me, part of what I hate about what's happening with the anti-choice legislation is it's all about women. Like, you made a bad choice. You're too incompetent to make some of these decisions, so we're going to make it for you. Anything that acknowledges that there's more than one person involved in a pregnancy, I think is a very good thing.
Joan Esposito, weekday afternoons 2 to 5 on WCPT 820.
Hi, I'm Marcel Spears. Keeping our global neighborhood safe is a tough job, made easier by America's brave military dogs. These dogs keep our troops safe by sniffing out bombs and IEDs and locating enemy positions. Yet when these K9 heroes retire, they're too often left overseas. American Humane works to bring these valiant dogs home and reunites them with their handlers for happy, healthy retirements. To learn how you can help, visit AmericanHumane.org.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley. President Biden will now sign that debt limit bill into law, meaning the nation will be able to continue paying its bills. The Senate approved the legislation last night. The AP's Ben Thomas.
While the final bill leaves neither Republicans nor Democrats fully pleased, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says,
"We knew we'd need to come together for a solution like the one that passed tonight. And so I'm happy to stand here passing this critical legislation to support our families, preserve vital programs, and most importantly, avoid catastrophic default."
In a statement, Biden calls the bipartisan agreement a big win for our economy and the American people. Ben Thomas, Washington.
Stop sending weapons to the battlefield. That's the request from China's Ukraine envoy.
Hello.
Yes.
Pastor Dixon Williams ready to go.
Okay.
The AP's Karen Shamas.
The envoy,
Hi, how you doing, Pastor?
gave
I
no
need you to listen to
indication,
her.
however, that his trip to the region made any progress.
Good morning.
towards the
How are you?
settlements. His appeal came as Washington and its European allies
Great.
are ramping up
Excuse
supplies
me?
of missiles, tanks, and other weapons to Ukrainian forces. That's
Can I get one or two more words from her?
Russian-occupied
You should speak-
territory.
you can speak
In a
to her
briefing with
directly,
reporters,
Pastor
Lee also
Williams.
noted
Can
that
we
challenges
hear-
remain
can we hear
for
you speak
peace
some
talks
more?
to take hold. I'm Karen Chamas.
Ukraine has shot down dozens of missiles and drones in Russia's latest attack on.
All right. Sounds good to me.
The investigation finds that Border Patrol medical staff in Texas declined to review the file of an 8-year-old girl with a chronic heart condition and rare blood disorder before she died in custody. The May jobs report comes out today. Experts think hiring slowed in May, but was still at a healthy level. Florida teenager Dev Shaw has won the Scripps National Spelling Bee. The winning word, Samophile, with a P. This is AP News. President Biden's joking that he was sandbagged after he tripped over a sandbag yesterday, says the White House, and fell down. The White House says he's fine now.
President Biden tripped and fell on stage during the Air Force Academy graduation in Colorado. The president was greeting the graduates with salutes and handshakes and turned to jog back toward his seat when he fell. The 80-year-old president was helped up and returned to his seat. The White House says he tripped over a sandbag and is fine. His message to Air Force Academy graduates:
the nation needs you.
He thanked them for choosing service over self.
Graduates, you've made a noble choice to lead a life of service.
How much time do we have, Henry?
Now, you also showed...
I believe we have more than 5 minutes. I can run those through real quick and check.
That great privilege is of leading in a world that
Yes.
will only get more confusing in the years to come. I'm Ed Donahue.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Michael Carroll. For today, we'll have mostly sunny skies with high temperatures working up into the lower 90s. We'll have our winds out of the east at 5 to 10. Then for tonight, mostly clear, a low of 64. Still a good deal of sunshine into your weekend, Saturday approaching 90, and for Sunday up to 86. Monday, a slight chance for an afternoon storm into the upper 80s. And that's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently at 69.
This is Ron Whittingham, and I'm co-owner of Megan Financial, an independent retirement and financial services firm here in Chicago. We've built our business on playing the long game, teaching financial literacy to our clients to prepare them for a great future and a dignified retirement.
We have 6 minutes.
401ks, they're all pretty complicated. We make sure that you understand it all. Give us a call at 708-444-1090. We're Megan Financial, and we're your partners in a happy retirement. Or visit us at megent.com.
Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors LLC, member of FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. The views depicted in this broadcast are general in nature and provided for informational use only. The views are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered as specific investment or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Keep in mind that investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Investment decisions should be based upon an individual's own goal, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Consult your investment and/or tax professional regarding your unique situation.
Transitioning out of the military, it's difficult. Just about everything around you changes. I would get phone calls that brothers were dying, some of them to suicide. And I found myself in another cold cemetery. And I started to wonder if I was next. It's a struggle to know that you're facing challenges, but not be ready to face them. Sleep doesn't come easy, and when it comes, it doesn't last long. You're tired all the time. I didn't reach out for that help, but thank God my wife did. She got me registered for Wounded Warrior Project, talking to somebody that would listen to me and understood my story, helped me realize that it was time to change. There's a new fight, there's a new mission, and that's something I'm eternally grateful for.
See how we help warriors combat stigma at woundedwarriorproject.org/combat stigma.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to...
3 minutes.
But I also had goals, and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Don't you wish your life came with a warning app?
Stop. That dog does not want to be petted.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
Move your coffee cup away from your computer.
Oh, no. So you can have more control.
Stop. You're texting your boss by mistake.
Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning. The cap is loose on that ketchup.
Ugh. Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
This is a WCPT moment and late.
1 minute.
2009, General Motors was facing bankruptcy as a result of the Great Recession. Wanting to keep their jobs and help the company, the unionized auto workers accepted concessions to allow GM to recover. GM received a bailout and tax breaks, while the employees' pay rates stayed the same. Several factories were slated to close down, the raising price of healthcare premiums, and very few temp workers being moved to permanent positions, all leading to 48,000 United Auto Workers walking out in September of 2019. The workers got together, protesting outside the car dealerships with picket signs and giant inflatable rats. And after 6 weeks of protest and General Motors losing $2 billion, they were willing to negotiate. The United Auto Workers received a 3% pay raise, factories staying open with more being built, a set process for temp workers to remain to permanent workers, and their healthcare premium prices staying the same. This has been a WCPT moment in labor.
Okay, I'll let you know the second that she's on.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from 2.
Yes. Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome. Happy Friday. Santita Jackson on the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Let's talk about migrants in Chicago today. And let's talk about the Sackler family. Who are they? Well, they own Purdue Pharma, and I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so let's work that out. And they have been shielded, their personal wealth, which is in the billions, that has been shielded by a high court in the United States from lawsuits, even though these big pharma manufacturers knowingly gave Americans opioids, which they knew would addict them. And in fact, there's so much contempt, Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, that these persons had for these people that they would call them pillbillies. Not hillbillies, pillbillies, because these were primarily poor white people, working class people, but poor. And they dumped, there was one town that had 3,000 people, but millions of pills were dumped into that town alone. So people all over the region could come there. Yeah, well, now there's really a limit on what these families can get, and the Sackler family's wealth has been protected. I want to know what you think about that. And what about this migrant? $51 million has been allocated by the city of Chicago to help settle migrant workers, migrants who are going to be coming into the United States. Governor Abbott has been dumping them, if you will. You shouldn't dump human beings, but he's been doing it all over the country in sanctuary cities like Chicago and New York City, et cetera, et cetera. Been dumping them up in the Northeast. Let's talk about that. What does that mean? And it seems that blacks and Latinos are at odds with each other. We should not be. We should be in coalition, but we need to talk about that. We're going to be exploring it more next week. A coalition of ministers, chief among them, Pastor Michael Flager, and Pastor Reverend Dr. Beth Brown from the Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church are going to be having a press conference today, along with Reverend Otis Moss and others, to talk about churches opening their doors to help these migrants. So I want to know what your thoughts are about that. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT, as I come to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT 820 and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet Andre and Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, and Chauncey, and Donnie D., and Hannah, and all my morning stars. Paula, one of the founding morning stars. Jewel, up there in New York, founding morning star. Eric out there in L.A. Ashley in Memphis. So many of you meet them on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I think you might have gotten there first, Ashley. Yeah. No, Andre did, but you and Andre, neck and neck. And then, of course, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, and I hope that you do, I need you to go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page. No other page is going to matter. So call me at 773-763-9278. First up, let's talk about the migrants, the $51 million passage passed by the Chicago City Council, 34-13. And boy, oh boy, was it a raucous meeting. And then the Sackler family, their personal wealth has been protected as their company knowingly addicted so many Americans to opioids. Hey, Linear Bob and Dave Dowling. Yeah, sending you all so much love, too. So call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT on Friday, June 2nd, 2023. Where is the year going? Get out there and live your best life, everybody. Live your best life. So let's get right to it. You know, this is a time of year when it is so exciting to be around as the sports play. But first, let's look at the fact that the crisis for the deficit has been averted. That's what they say. The Senate passed the bill last night, narrowly passed a bill to suspend the debt ceiling on last night, sending the legislation to the president's desk and averting a federal debt default that could have wreaked havoc on the U.S. economy and all global markets, because America, although de-dollarization is happening, is still the reserve currency for the world. I don't know how much longer that's going to last, but the final vote was 63-36, 46 Democrats, with 17 Republicans supporting the bill, while 5 Democrats and 31 Republicans opposed. 60 votes were needed to pass this bill. What do you think about that, everybody? Former President Trump repeated his story on Fox News on their town hall meeting that the election was stolen. That's right. And he was able to repeat his grievances. And what do you think about that, everybody? What do you think about it? Was he really challenged? No. The first installment of the broadcast on Fox News came 2 weeks after the CNN broadcast. And we're going to be talking about that and looking at it as we continue to go forward. President Biden tripped and fell after handing out the last diploma at the graduation ceremony at the U.S. Air Force Academy on Thursday. It can happen, everybody. He was walking back to his seat unassisted, and much is being made of this. How do you think that's going to impact the campaign? Elon Musk has been accused of insider trading in a proposed class action lawsuit by investors. They say that the Tesla CEO, who's now again the wealthiest man on earth, manipulated the cryptocurrency, costing them billions of dollars. Wow, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278. Chicago, a high of 81 degrees. Sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's going to be even warmer, 87 degrees. Thunderstorms in the NBA. The Nuggets 104, the Heat 93. The Heat have won the championship before, but the Nuggets never in their 47-year history. And they won at home. Now, guess what? I heard this stat on CNN this morning. Teams that win the first game at home win the series 78% of the time. The Nuggets here, we're going to see. The NHL, the Panthers, the Golden Knights, of course, they are in the finals. Who's going to get that Stanley Cup trophy? We will see. In the WNBA, the Liberty will be facing off against the Sky. That's right, at 5 p.m. this evening. Sunday, the Lynx, well, they fell to the Sun. 89-84, but they'll be playing the Mystics tomorrow in Major League Baseball, the Twins 7, the Guardians 6. The Tigers will be playing the White Sox tonight, and the Cubs will be playing the Padres out in San Diego later on today. Let us get some good news from Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams. I always love getting good news from her, and so do you. She's just our favorite. We love her. And I want you to get her book, I See You, Sis. It's going to bless you, as it has blessed me and so many others. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, how you doing?
Good morning. I am well, Santita. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Always. So what's the good news today?
The good news today is about happiness. If you remember a few years ago, Pharrell Williams debuted a song to the soundtrack for the movie Trolls, and it was called Happy. And it was just a feel-good dance song, and even to this day, when you hear it, you want to dance and be happy. The purpose of our lives for the Dalai Lama is to be happy. But happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. And don't we hear that from people all the time? I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. But just like Pharrell said, what does happiness mean to you? Well, for us, and for many believers, happiness is something that many people strive for in life, yet it can feel elusive and fleeting. The truth is, true happiness can only be found in genuine relationships and in God. The Bible tells us that happy are the people whose God is the Lord. When we place our trust in God and seek God above all else, we have an opportunity to experience a deep and lasting joy that transcends our circumstances. And this joy is not dependent on our external circumstances, but on the internal peace that comes from knowing and trusting in God. Let me say it this way. For all of you who have a stove, more specifically a gas-burning stove, then you understand the importance of happiness and joy. What do I mean? So, on your stove, there are 4 burners, and the burners can be turned up or down based on the needs for your cooking. If you need the flame to go higher, you can turn it up. If you need the flame to be lower, you can...
Dr. Knighton's ready.
But that's happiness in our lives. Happiness is usually predicated on what happens. Someone says something great to you, your happiness level goes up. Someone insults you, your happiness level goes down. And so happiness is dependent upon what happens to us in every given moment and every given day. But just below the surface of those eyes in the stove is what's called a pilot light. A pilot light doesn't go up, it doesn't go down, it stays steady the entire time. But the pilot light provides the burning source for the entire stove. But if the pilot light goes out, everything goes out. Well, guess what? That's joy. Joy doesn't shift based on what someone says to you or does to you. Joy doesn't shift if you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Joy is ever burning just below the surface. And so while so many of us are looking for happiness, what we should be seeking is true and lasting joy. And that comes from what happens on the inside. Even in difficult times, we can find happiness in God's presence. We can find hope. We can provide joy. The Apostle Paul wrote, I have learned the secret of being content in every situation. I can do all things through God who gives me strength. So happiness is not just a fleeting emotion or a temporary state of mind. It's a deep and abiding joy that comes from relationships, fulfillment in God, fulfillment in life. May we seek God above all else and find happiness in His presence. I wish you all a joyful and happy day. And that's the good news.
That is the great news. Thank you for that. That pilot remains steady. Thank you, thank you. This joy I have, the world didn't give it to me. And the world
can't take it away.
Come on now. I hear Shirley Caesar pulsing in my ear. I love it, I love it, I love it. It's joy I have. That's right, that's right. Thank you so much. I'm happy. I am all the day long. Of course, get the book, I See You, Sis. I See You, Sis by Reverend Tisha Dixon Williams, our spiritual doctor. I love that. Love you so much. God bless you.
Love you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Absolutely. Dr. Shanina Knighton, infection preventionist. I've been talking about you over the past couple of days, and some people want to interview you here in Chicago who have global reach, because we have gotten so much from you. We are so grateful to Dr. Deborah Holden for letting us know about you. Infection preventionist, registered nurse, so much that you know. I am curious. In these economically stressful times, I told you, yesterday, the day before yesterday, I had an experience at the grocery store. I didn't buy any critical items. I bought some some tortilla chips because I like salsa. I even like to make it myself, and some veggies. I mean, just some stuff. Really, I was filling in blanks. $70 almost. I was like, what? And the cashier said, "Oh, ma'am, these prices are too much. I used to get $350 a month, and now I've been cut down to $250 a month." I said, "Oh wow." She gets SNAP, but she's got a teenage son. And I said, "How are you making it?" She said, "I don't know." She said, "I'm pinching pennies from day to day." And I just thought about how cruel it is for her to have to work in a grocery store, work hard every day, be on her feet. Don't talk about these people being out of luck. These people are hard-working people who are doing an honest day's work on honest jobs where we need them. I don't like scanning my groceries myself. I like talking to a person. I do. And I believe you need to employ people. People are necessary. But this woman can't afford the food in the store in which she works. And so I want to know about the role of hunger, because hunger is growing in America. They call it food insecurity, which is a nice way of prettying it up, but hunger is real. I mean, what role does hunger play in helping to keep your immune system boosted so you can fend off of infection, Dr. Knighton?
Absolutely, Santita. So it's that reality, and there's really no other way to cut it. And when I say that, I genuinely mean, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of living, you have at the very bottom of that pyramid of being food, shelter, and security. Without those three things just in themselves, it is very challenging for anyone to, let's say, fulfill life dreams, to be able to focus, to be able to do many things that there is an expectation of. And what happens is people are misclassified as, let's say, being too irritable, being aggressive, being mean, but we never understand the role that hunger and needing food plays in someone's life, as that is basic need of life that everyone needs in order to be able to survive. And when we're talking about food, we are talking about things that are nutritious, meaning that with us knowing that additives are inside of the food, an individual that doesn't have access to anything but those foods with additives, or their resources will only afford foods with additives, they already are going to experience some sort of chemical imbalance, because as I've spoken of before, anytime you have food that have paint thinner as an ingredient inside of the food,
Wait, what? Paint thinner?
Oh, yeah, paint thinner. Like some of the same chemicals that are inside of some of the, let's say, manufacturing items are also inside of food. And we know that. And so because we understand that some of these things are inside of food, it's very challenging for somebody's body to get what it is that they need if that is all that they are consuming, because that is all that they can afford. So as we're talking about food security, I do tell people, I'm saying that, there's a preference of wanting fresh vegetables over canned vegetables, or, being over, let's say, frozen vegetables. But the bottom line is understanding, am I eating a nutrient-dense diet, and I don't even like that word diet because it says die at the beginning. So I'm just going to say food, or healthy, eating healthy. If you are eating, which is healed by, if you are eating healthier foods, or like if you're saying, okay, do I get more of this, that this is filling for me, versus do I get something more that's going to fill my cup nutrient-wise, it is a balance. And so sometimes people think that bigger portions are what fills them up, but in fact, does your body have the adequate nutrients that it needs? So, Santita, a lot of the problems is, yes, it is food insecurity, and those issues do exist, but we also, too, have to recognize that there is a lack of education in America based off of what is considered wholesome foods versus what is considered junk, versus what is considered processed, what is considered not processed, and how are these items impacting the body. And so I know that is a challenging conversation to be able to have, but I was literally looking over a study not too long ago, and it actually showed that individuals that do receive, SNAP benefits, they had higher levels of obesity. And while someone want to say, like, A and B equals C, it's not that easy in regards to people choosing to go out and buy unhealthy things. But it's saying, are they educated on how to cook it? Are they educated on what it does for the body? And are they educated on what it does for their health overall and its relationship with chronic diseases, which is something that has to be elevated in the conversation a lot more, because people just don't know what they don't know.
Paint thinner? Lorraine said, paint thinner. Huh? We don't even know what's in our food. I mean, is it just, I got less than a minute. Is there any way that we can find, I mean, do you have a list of the foods that, maybe like the Dirty 30, the top 10? I mean, something,
So what I would highly suggest is to look up food dyes. And when we think about food dyes and the fact that, think about it, like dyes, there's some pretty colored paints, and you can get some pretty colored Skittles. Okay, let me not say that, not a brand. There are pretty colored foods, snacks that you can get, and long story short, you should be paying attention and saying what are the side effects of. So if you see red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, just ask, like, what are the side effects of these colors, and see what you find and see what comes up. Because I explain that a lot of times when we are looking at some of these items, we don't recognize where they come from. There are limited studies on what the additive effect does to our body, meaning if you are consuming, let's say, a key harmful ingredient every single day in school lunch, like let's say you're making a sandwich and you have this particular ingredient, then what does that do?
20 seconds.
Got it. You have to ask, what does that do to the body over 20, 30 years? And so without going in depth, we definitely have to do better about understanding what we're putting in our bodies and understand, is that leading us to have more of those hunger sensations also?
When I came out of my weight loss surgery, there were forbidden substances for us. MSG, I'm saying it. The food dyes, all of those things. They wanted us to eat clean. Even though I got away from that, I'm getting back to that. I've never really eaten messy because my mother didn't allow that. But it's something to it, everybody. It's something to it with your weight, with your health, all of that. Dr. Shanina Knighton, everybody. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA, sending you so much love. Let's talk about the migrants in Chicago. $51 million has been allocated to them. And the Black and Latino populations of Chicago, at least those who were at the city council meeting yesterday, they had a big, big falling out. Let's talk about it. Back in just a minute. Dr. Knighton, oh wow. I told you need to come up with the Dirty 30. I'll see him. Oh my gosh. But you know what? I want to see if you can participate next week. They want to talk about the hair straighteners. If this is in your purview, hair straighteners causing cancer in black women, because there's a pushback from some hairdressers about that.
I mean, think about it. It's a disruption to the industry, and the thing is, like, what I would honestly like to see happen is there be an open dialogue between the scientists that did the study and hairstylists.
Okay.
Because I think it's that lack of education, Santita, that exists amongst them. That's the thing. A hairstylist is not going to want to go through that ingredient list. If I go through that ingredient list and I look up side effects of, and I start to actually evaluate some of those things, then it becomes a very disturbing realization of what's happening. But if you have someone that literally their clientele is like, hey, I got to put this perm in somebody's hair, and this is a mindset, so it really happens, We don't want to hear that that's not something you should be using because it can cause cancer. And that's just the reality of it. But I actually know hairstylists that have suffered from it, and they couldn't understand why their health took a negative turn. So when I talk about they got fibroids, they ended up with endometriosis and a lot of other, and cancer. Ended up with cancer.
You're ringing a bell with Lorraine. And she said, please talk about this fibroids cancer. She said, I wish you'd talk about it. We're going to talk about it. And I want to find a day next week when you have the space, even to stay an extra 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because not talking about a product, talking about the process, right? Because, I have to be honest with you, that's a conversation that I missed. Thank God. I tried to get a relaxer when my mother got me when I was almost 10. All my hair fell out. I get it. My hair doesn't need to be relaxed. I get it.
Mine did too, like at the same exact age, believe it or not.
I believe it.
And and it was like really bad. Like it changed the texture of my skin, like, on my scalp. And to like literally wear a very low afro when they were not popular. And, it was a such thing with people calling you bald head, but I had no choice because I had gotten a bad perm. But that is the thing. Like, these are issues that we don't talk about.
Hi, Ms. Jackson. Reverend Beth Brown's here to go, and we also have a minute and a half.
I don't know if you know, the same exact thing is coming up. Which I ain't gonna lie. Remember y'all was asking me about UV radiation for killing COVID?
Yeah.
And I told you I wouldn't because of cancer. They're now showing how that's linked to a lot of the UV machines in nail salons.
Oh. I've got to tell you, I didn't have a relaxer long, and it wasn't a strong one. My mother thought it would help me because I had damaged my hair with the afro. She gave me what she called a poodle fro. Okay, that's what my hair looked like. Oh, girl. But I'm older than you. Back in the day, that was not what was popular. The bush was popular. I couldn't get that. But I teased it. I found a way to tease it, which completely wrecked my hair. I couldn't even get a pick through it. It was a mess. So when Mr. Folks applied, and he was just going to put a mild relaxer in.
Back in 30.
Sure, he lifted up my hair and he looked at the nape of my neck and he said, she has two completely different kinds of hair on her head. What, baby, what have you done? And I told him, he said, ugh. And he waited for my mother to get there. She said, well, just put it in, it won't do too much harm. Girl, I looked up and my hair had eaten up the back of my head like several years later. I can only get it like twice a year. It was a mess. It was a mess. But you know what? Let me pivot. You should listen to this because we had quite the day yesterday. I've got Reverend Dr. Beth Brown.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. At the top of the hour, we will be talking about the Sackler family. They're one of Big Pharma's big billionaire families. Even some of these executives in these big pharma companies refer to opioid users as pillbillies. Hillbillies, they're primarily poor, they're white, they're working class. There was one West Virginia town that had 3,000 people, but millions of pills had been dumped there, not only for the residents, but for people in the region. Let's talk about this because a high court affirmed that Sackler's private wealth in the billions can be protected and that people can't sue them. But see, that happened back in the Reagan administration, so we're going to be talking about that. Where can people get relief when they've been injured by these medicines? Where do they get relief? Well, particularly when you know that the medicine you're giving me is going to hurt me. Let's talk about what's happening in the Chicago City Council, what's happening in Chicago. Governor Greg Abbott out of Texas is doing something that, that is mean-spirited in its motivation. He said, okay, you got the migrants coming across the border, I'm just going to dump them. You don't dump human beings, but that's what he's been doing in sanctuary cities like Chicago, New York City, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Dump them up in Martha's Vineyard and expected them to be treated with hostility. Well, In the Chicago City Council yesterday, there was a vote, 34-13, to spend $51 million to help care for migrants. But there was tension between Black and Latinos. And then you have some churches that are stepping forward to help the migrants and other churches that are hanging back. Some people are stepping forward to help the migrants. Other people are hanging back. And I want to know what your thought is about this. Call me at 773-763-9278. We'll be exploring it more next week. But I wanted to bring on a woman for whom I have great admiration. It's very, very difficult for women to assume pulpits. For a whole lot of reasons, we don't get them. And so you really have to be at the top of the heap. You know how it is. We have to be superior in order to be considered equal. And there's no greater theologian, someone who really puts the flesh on the bones of the gospel, than Reverend Dr. Beth Brown, thinking of R&B, Reverend Dr. Brown, Pastor Brown. But she's the pastor of the Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church, and she's also the interim commissioner on the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. And so I welcome you to the show. I hope you will consider this to be your home. I'm so glad and so honored that you're with us this morning, so early. There is a call to faith communities to come to do what for migrants? I don't want to speak for you. Help us to understand what you and Father Michael Flager and others are coming together to do.
Well, thank you so much, Santita. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on your show, and it is definitely my honor to be with you this morning. So what we are doing is, I want to preface this by saying, for 4 years, my congregation and others in the city, but my congregation in particular, has been housing asylum seekers. And the way that it works is we invite them to come and live in our church, and we provide them with some financial support and all the other supports they need to get their kids in school, to get their city IDs, eventually to file their legal paperwork, to then get work authorization, and then get jobs and begin to save money so they can get into their own apartments. Typically, this process takes anywhere from 6 months to a year. So we're on our 4th asylum family in 4 years, and the other 3 that we have housed and supported are independent, happily living on their own, not just in Chicago, but elsewhere as well. So we've been working very closely with the Wellington Avenue United Church of Christ and the Chicago Religious Leadership Network Sanctuary Working Group, and together we have created this model that seems to work and is sustainable. It isn't a huge burden on any one group or organization. It's kind of a shared thing. And so we decided when the numbers of migrants living in police districts started getting higher and higher and higher, that we have a model that could work for other faith communities. And so today at 12 noon, we're going to launch this effort at my church, Lincoln Park Presbyterian Church, to issue a citywide call to faith communities across Chicago to get into groups of 2 and 3 and commit to a family or a couple or a grouping of people for a year. And we believe that by doing that, we can empty the police districts of people living in them, which is going to be helpful for the police department in terms of what they need to be focused on this summer. And we'll also create these new relationships and partnerships, which we think will be beneficial to everybody. So that's what's happening today. We're getting ready to launch this big citywide call to faith communities.
And you'll be joined by Father Michael Flager and Alderman Rosana Rodriguez Sanchez, and you'll be joined by a lot of people. And of course, the Trinity United Church of Christ, of course, at the helm. Of course, historically, that has been Pastor Jeremiah Wright's church, but it is now under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, whose father, of course, was Dr. King's favorite preacher. So you know, and he comes from that tradition, among others. And it was very painful to watch the fight break out in the city council yesterday from the gallery and really on the floor with the alders. 34-13 was the vote, but $51 million has been allocated to the migrants. And there's a real tension between the Black and Latino communities. And I think we need to talk about it because I said, we're fighting each other, Pastor Brown.
Yeah.
And it's a false choice we're making. Black people were brought here on another corporate excursion. It was called colonialism. It's the same thing that we have going on now. I mean, President Biden, a couple of weeks ago in an interview, said, look, we need our farm workers. I said, oh, okay, so you're going to drop the truth a little bit. But we still have not learned that you pay people a fair and decent wage for a day's work. Now, black people didn't work for free. We were just not paid. And there was a whole system that went to that. How does the church step into that gap? Because that's very real. What do you say? I mean, my mother said, oh, right, as Christians, we're just going to throw people away. Are you serious? But I have to tell you, in many respects, I'm taking a minority position in my community. And it's painful to see, but I understand black people have been so abused. The first time a bomb was dropped in America, it was dropped on black people in Tulsa. I mean, it's like every time we try to move forward, we face these. I mean, it's just, the government's against us, and then private business. I mean, how do you step into that gap, Reverend Dr. Beth Brown?
Yes, that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I want to say that as I respond to this, I think it's important for your listeners to know that that I am a white, queer woman pastor who serves a church on the north side of Chicago. And so that is important for people to know. So I am not what I would call someone in and from the neighborhood as I respond to this question. I also want you to know, though, that most of my organizing and activist work is done with pastors, amazing pastors, on the south and west side. So Father Michael Flager, Reverend Dr. Otis Moss, Pastor Cy Fields, Pastor Sierra Bates Chamberlain, Pastor Chris Griffin, Rabbi Seth Limmer. Like, we do a lot together in terms of working for justice in so many different ways for black and brown communities. And so I have, again, this outside experience, and I am not an insider.
Well, but
and here's what...
Before you answer the question, because you just brought this up, and I think it's important for us to understand it, because I think intersectionality is a real thing. Yeah. How is it...
It is a very real thing.
It's a very real thing. How is it that the joke when Reverend Jackson was running for president 40 years ago was that he was the only person, he was the first top-tier candidate to establish a desk for the queer community, if you will. No, that had never been done before. For the Arab community, that had never been done before. How has being a woman, because you've had white privilege, but you are a woman, which puts us all behind the 8 ball. How has being a member of the LGBTQ plus community, how has that shaped you? And I mean, because you've lived under the boot, and it seems to me that you relate to people who live under the boot as well.
Yep. I really appreciate your question on that, because it has shaped me so much. And what I will say about that is that no matter what the oppression, the risk in any group that is being oppressed is that once you are oppressed, you will then become an oppressor. And so let me use the queer movement as an example of that. Early in the queer movement, it was all about white gay men. And then eventually, lesbians started rising up and saying, look, we also are a part of this group. And so decades later, it was gays and lesbians. And then eventually people who were bisexual kind of rose up and said, hey, we are also a part of this group. And then what happened is gay, lesbian, and bisexual people did not want to acknowledge or fight for in any way transgender folks. And I think it's a perfect example of when you are oppressed, if you are not intentional in your both intersectionality but also your own work, you can easily become an oppressor. And I'm certainly not drawing an exact comparison because, you know, gay people were not enslaved. You know, so many other comparisons that just can't be made. But I think part of what we're seeing here is it's this idea that hurt people. But also we tend to get very narrow in our focus because we get into a survival mentality. How am I going to survive? And then we forget the other things. And I had the most amazing mentor. You know, I've been a pastor for 32 years, and my mentor, the Reverend Dr. Jane Addams Spar, right from the very start, she said to so many of us, we are not going to advocate for queer people without advocating for everybody else who is being oppressed. And so she was teaching me and so many others intersectionality before it was really a word that was being used. And so she was bringing in all of the black queer people, the brown queer people. She just said, we are leaving no one behind in our advocacy. And that had such a deep impact on me. And I was, in my advocacy work, I was brought up in that way, in that model. And so I believe in it deeply. And so anytime I hear people talking about, no, we're not gonna do this for this group because it needs to be about us. I think about her. She's still living. She's still, one of my dearest friends. But I also think about, again, how tempting it is to narrow our focus and get into survival mode. And I understand it, and I will always try to expand beyond that because it is soul-sucking for us to say, this group doesn't matter, because where have you heard that in history? So as soon as we start saying, this group doesn't matter right now, we matter. And I believe deep, deep, deep in my heart that if we can open our arms wide, that more and more will come. And again, I'm saying that as a white person, so I realize that can be problematic, but I also just believe it. I believe that when we will fight for everyone, we will all end up better off. It's Dr. King's idea, right? Mm-hmm. This deep, deep interconnectedness.
Well, you know what? Do you mind if we go to some of these callers? Because I think that we're going to have to face these tough questions together, and we can resolve them. Because I think, honestly, we're being asked to make a false choice. There were more billionaires who were established during the pandemic. More mom and pop stores went out of business. More small businesses. More small farms. You got to look at the game. You got to take the 30,000-foot view as well as the view from the weeds. Poor people lost. 99% of us lost. 1% plus won. Got to look at that. We have to look at the role that white supremacy plays, in the Latino community, because that's part of what we're dealing with, that it plays in the highest wage earning couple in the United States is not a white heterosexual couple. It's a gay male white couple, because it's two white men together. So there's a whole lot we got to unpack here. But let me go to Otis. Otis, what's on your mind today? Thank you so much for calling in.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Otis.
I'm calling. I wanted to call in and talk about Brandon Johnson, about what he did, but that was already talked about. But this lady on the phone, she mentioned any words that she mentioned about Martin Luther King, she needs to stop it. And I want everybody to call in because Martin Luther King did not speak about gay rights. He talked about black people and the way how we were done. I'm more like to say how my parents were done when in the 60s and the 50s. The LBGT hijacked Martin Luther King words for decades.
But
And
Otis,
we need to put the stop to that.
Otis, may I say this to you as someone whose parents didn't march with Dr. King? They worked for him for $75 a week. Dr. King actually, while he did not speak specifically about the LGBTQ plus community, he did, under duress, have Bayard Rustin working for him. And it was a very, very difficult
Okay,
because
and he was a black man.
No. He was also...
And he was a black man.
Yes, and he was also a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. Let me just say
But
this.
we didn't hear that. But that's not what he was talking about.
No, that he did talk
You know
about
what?
that. No,
You can have black people. You can have black people that's gay. Black people that was gay going through the same thing
Otis, absolutely.
as other black people was going through.
Otis, wait a minute.
But his goal was black people.
Otis, let's not talk over
In
each
the
other.
end, Martin Luther King didn't.
Otis, let's not talk over each other. I want to engage you. But we're not going to have a disrespectful conversation. Okay. Is that understood? What I'm trying to do... No. What I'm trying to share with you is because I grew up with the people who worked for him. I grew up with the people who were literally with him when he was shot. My father was talking to him when they blew off his neck. When Dr. King was going through an airport here in Chicago, my father was taking him along with a couple of people so he could get on his plane. And because the line to work for Dr. King or even to stand with him was not long. In fact, when he died, 70+% of Americans disapproved of him. He was the most unpopular man in America when he was killed. And that's when my father went to work for him. He was pulled out of the University of Chicago where he was getting a master's in divinity. He was on full scholarship. Dr. King said, I need you to come and work for me because the kind of ministry that I see you going into, I can train you. And I can teach you more about theology than you can learn in that school. I'm just giving you my lived experience, okay? So what happened was this. No. I'm about to tell you. If you just hold on a minute, because I want to share with you.
Okay.
Because just listen. I'm not many people removed from Dr. King. My brother's godfather's Dr. King. He saved his life. So just hold on a moment. What I'm saying is he was stopped. He was stopped in the airport by white and black soldiers who were on their way to Vietnam. And they asked him together, why do you hate us? And Dr. King missed his plane. He said, I don't hate you at all. Sons, what I'm trying to do is fight for you to stay alive. I think it's an awful thing that you're not allowed to go to school together in the United States, but you're asked to die together on a rich man's war, to paraphrase him. And so what I'm saying to you is, all of that has something to do with all of this, because I don't think that Dr. King would stand against the LGBTQ plus community, because he didn't do it with Bayard Rustin, and he was pressured to do that. Having a gay person work, you can, but I'm just saying to you, having a gay person work for you 70, 60, 70 years ago, put you on the firing line. But he went past that because he loved Bayard Rustin, he loved James Baldwin, and he loved some other people who he knew were closeted too. And he felt that they had a contribution. And some of them were white, some of them were black, some of them were Hispanic. Dr. King worked with everybody because very few people wanted to work with him, Otis.
Okay. Can I say something quick?
Absolutely.
The whole goal of Martin Luther King was for black people. As anybody else that wanted to join, they would join. Wait. The whole goal of Martin Luther King, what he was doing for the discrimination of black people, that they're not getting the same rights as every other people that's called American in this country here. And near the end of Martin Luther King, before he was assassinated, he was talking about black people getting a check because what this country did for white people and for farmers. You got the video on there, but Martin Luther King, I never heard him talk about gay rights. And that that guy, James Baldwin is another guy. James Baldwin did not speak for gay rights. He spoke for black people.
Yes, he did. That's what Giovanni's room was about.
Let me talk.
No, I'm gonna let you do that.
I'm trying to get off. I'm trying to get off the phone.
Stop. No, I don't want you to get off the phone. I want to talk with Giovanni's room, his book.
James Baldwin
said, I'll stop, Otis. You can make your point.
I can't speak.
You can speak, but you're not going to speak over me. We will engage each other. We're not going to talk at all, which means we have a conversation amongst ourselves. We talk with each other. I hear you.
I let you talk.
You're not letting me.
Let me shoot this.
No, just wait one moment. You're not letting me talk. And you're not allowing me to talk, and I'm not allowing you.
I only got like you let me talk 10 seconds, and then you interrupted me. I let you talk.
You're not letting me do anything. You're not letting me do anything, Otis. Stop.
I know what, I wasn't being rude.
Yes, you are.
I wasn't being rude, but you're not letting me talk.
No, you said what?
And
Stop.
That's the same.
Otis, I'm trying to let you finish, but what I was trying to say to you was Giovanni's Room, which was one of James Baldwin's biggest selling books, was about being a gay black man.
Who wrote that book?
James Baldwin.
Okay, being a gay black man, right. Of course it was hard.
And he was out loud and proud. And all I'm simply saying to you is, right. I'm not trying to. And Dr. King was on a Poor People's Campaign, which was a rainbow campaign when he was killed.
That was later on.
No, it was
but
not.
He talking about cutting the check. Didn't he
talked
speak about
all
cutting
of
the check for black people?
Not specifically. No, he did not. What he was saying was, he said black people, unlike Europeans were brought here and they were given land, black people were given nothing, coming out of slavery, having worked here for 200 years without pay. He said that's unfair.
Yeah, okay.
And the promises.
Let's get back to the black. Let's get back to the LGBT thing and the black civil rights. That's why I mainly call for.
Okay, hold on.
Here's the thing. Ask that lady. That lady on there. Ask her how many black-owned businesses in
Otis, you're absolutely right. And stay right there, Otis. I want to talk with you during the break. One thing that we've got to do, and if you could stay with me just for a hot second, because I want you to engage, Otis. We're going to speak to each other respectfully now. And I try to share with you some things that I know, my lived experience. It's not a superior experience, it's just a lived one. When Reverend people come to my father glassy-eyed and with a glow, how was it to work for Dr. King? My father said the line was not long to get there. Nobody wanted to work for him when my parents went to work for him. Nobody. He had gone from being one of the most honored men on earth in 1964 when he got the Nobel Prize, and by the way, J. Edgar Hoover sent him a note telling him to blow his brains out before he went to Norway to get the prize. So when he leaned into the lectern and said, on behalf of Negro people, and you saw a world weariness in him, because he had the chief police officer in the United States, the head of the FBI, telling him to kill himself and telling his wife about their personal business. Don't tell me that. And if you want to tell the story, tell the full one.
Okay.
No, Otis, stay right there.
I want to tell the who?
Stay right there, do it, because I want you to talk to Pastor Brown during the break, okay? Just stay right, because I want to get the full story out, which is what I try to do. And all I try to do is share with you what I know. Because I'm with people. No, you don't have to ask her anything. You can ask Reverend Dr. Brown during the break. So just stay right there. Everybody, you should be on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. But let's talk about the No, I got a lot of people looking at us on Facebook and YouTube. Trust. Stay right there. And let's talk about the Sackler family, everybody. The Sacklers are going to be able to keep their billions, even though they knowingly poisoned people and made them addicts of opioids. Back in just a few minutes. And more Black, I wish you would come in, because it's talking and writing are two different things. You miss a lot in the writing. You do. And there's that. But what is the question, Mr. Otis, that you have for Reverend Dr. Brown? Is Otis there?
I was missing the point or missing the question?
No. You were turned down. I couldn't hear you. I wanted you to ask Reverend Dr. Brown a question.
Okay. My thing is, Dr. Brown. My thing was that Martin Luther King. This lady from the LGBT, the lady from the LGBTQ community. I guess here in Chicago. My thing is there are no black businesses over there. I need her. I want her to name me 5 black-owned businesses over there in the LGBT community in Boys Town. And the thing is, and the thing is, when you go and they claim they for us, But yet they have made songs about having sex with little boys and stuff. And there's a video on YouTube about it. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. And there was not that much backlash on it.
So your question is what?
And they always using the black. They use.
No, I want to know what your question is for Pastor Brown.
My thing is this. I just like I said
well,
to
then
her.
ask the question and let her answer it.
Name me.
Okay.
Okay. Name me 5 black-owned businesses in the black LGBT community.
Okay.
Name me 5 of them.
And bearing in mind that at the beginning of her discussion, she talked about the discrimination that gay women have felt from white gay men. But let me let you speak to that, Pastor Brown. Let her finish.
Sure. So I want to begin by saying I want to clarify one thing, and that is I never said in my comments that Dr. King was defending the LGBTQ community. I never made that connection.
You used his words.
Nope. Hang on. What I said was Dr. King spoke to our interconnectedness. And what I mean by that is absolutely related to his primary message, which was why everyone hated him, which was about poverty. And the idea that if someone is without, that is going to have an impact on everybody. We see the impact, right? So it's like here in Chicago. If the North Side tries to ignore, for example, if there's a wealthy community on the North Side that tries to ignore the fact that there are neighborhoods on the South and West Sides that have been long neglected, they better understand that there is going to be
to the question about answering about the business.
No, stop. Let her finish answering. No, you have not understood anything because you're not listening, Otis. And don't do that.
You're making this about the fact that I am queer, and everything I've been talking about.
No, I'm not.
Otis, stop and let her answer.
You're not answering my question.
No, yes, she is. Okay. Otis, listen to her. Stop that, Otis.
So I am not somebody. I am not somebody who automatically knows who owns what businesses, but I can tell you about a couple. I know that here in Andersonville, there is a black-owned business, 2 lesbian women who own a bar called Nobody's Darling. It's amazing. I also know that up here in Andersonville, there is an amazing Southern food restaurant called,
let me ask you this.
But I've been to it.
Is there outreach? Because, there's always been tension between the white gay community and the black civil rights movement, because white people lean on privilege, right? And they lean into it.
Yeah.
And in fact, Richard Pryor is famous for having cursed out at the Hollywood Bowl about 50 years ago at a big event. Because he was booed, he started talking about black rights, and it was a white gay male crowd. And they started booing him, and he went off on them. He said, you don't even stand with me on basic things. What are you talking about? So there's that tension, which is what you spoke to, I think, at the top, is very real. But how do you speak to Otis? Because Otis black people have been excluded and have been dumped on for 400 years. And everything that's been promised to us, the only people who do worse than black people are the indigenous folks. Because they've not, every promise that's been made to them has not been fulfilled, not one.
Yeah.
So what do you say before we go, Otis, because we're going to have to pivot, and we're going to talk about this more next week. Pastor Brown?
Okay.
No, she's going to finish.
Go first?
No, not go first.
Oh.
She's going to wrap this up because I've got to move on to the next topic. But I wanted her to speak to what you're saying. No, that's it. Otis.
What I will say is that the issue of racism is an absolutely current issue in the queer community. So the example would be Boys Town in Lakeview. There have been multiple businesses in Boys Town that have overtly done things that are racist. And fortunately, there are now enough white and black people kind of working together to end some of that. that there has been an outcry. So I'll give you an example. The Center for Halstead a few years ago hired a security firm of mostly white off-duty police officers, Walsh Securities, and a coalition of people led by the Reverend Jamie Frazier, a gay black man, stood up and fought so hard to get Walsh Security out of the Center on Halstead. And what's happening now is when businesses, fortunately because of social media, when white gay-owned businesses are doing things that are overtly racist or even,
unconsciously
implicitly racist, right, then everybody is standing up and saying, not okay, and then people try to not frequent that particular business. And so it is forcing some change. But it's still a very real issue. And I think, again, it's because people don't understand the idea of intersectionality. And so, white gay men continue to go on and do their thing. And not all, right? Not all white gay men, because there are many white gay men who are working across intersections. But it has definitely been an issue for a very long time. And again, it's an example of what happens when you only focus on the needs of your particular group and not
all day, and didn't have time to catch up on the news during work.
We're about to come back.
Stop. We've got you covered. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Sorry.
Fight. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That happened in the
We're
studio.
stalling.
Okay, Otis, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to let you close. You're going to have less than a minute when we get back on the other side. Then I'm going to give the pastor a minute to close, and that's going to be that, okay?
Okay.
All right,
Thank
stand
you.
by.
Okay, I
Less
want
than a
y'all to
minute.
hit
So
it.
when
You
you,
and her.
no, so
One time.
Otis, we're about to go back up. Stop.
We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Friday, June 2nd, 2023. I'm Santita Jackson. This is WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to meet us on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. I want you to meet us on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and let's talk. We will be talking about what's being done with the migrants and all around the country. Next week, we'll be speaking of it more extensively. We're going to be pivoting in just a second to what happened with the opioid crisis. Many, many years ago, and in fact, Gary Webb, esteemed journalist, confirmed what had been...
Chris got dropped. I need to call him back, and we have no one for Aaron, so we'll get everyone on. Drugs
were dropped in the black community by our government, unfortunately. And now we're finding that opioids were dropped in the white community. And one of the families, one of these big pharma families, they do it under the cover of executive privilege. Their private wealth, which is in the billions, is being protected. And there are very few pathways to suing a pharmaceutical company for any kind of injury by their medicines. So we need to talk about that. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. And Otis, wanted to give you some closing thoughts here. And we will do that if you can call us back. But I've got a tremendous panel who are going to be talking about the Sackler family who own Purdue. Millions of pills were dropped on a town of 3,000 people. Why? So that the region could pick up opioids. And I guess to numb out the people of the town. So let's talk about that on 773-763-9278. Let's get to some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. The Senate passed a debt limit bill late last night, averting a U.S. debt default. The legislation, which was passed by the House on Wednesday, will be sent to President Biden for his signature today. Hurricane season began yesterday with officials predicting 12 to 17 named tropical storms that will develop in the Atlantic this year. 5 to 9 of those systems could become hurricanes, and as many as 4 could strengthen into major hurricanes at Category 3 or stronger, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Senate passed a bill Thursday to block President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. This means Both the Senate and the House have now passed legislation blocking the program, which promises to cancel up to $20,000 of debt for millions of borrowers. And those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. In Chicago, we're expecting a high of 81 degrees and sunny. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, 87 degrees. Thunderstorms in the NBA. Turn it down just a little bit. In the NBA, the Nuggets 104, the Heat 93. Just remember, 78% of the games won by an at-home team. Just bring it down just a little bit. Just a little. That's just a little loud. Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it down. Can we bring it down a little bit? There you go. You can let it play, but it just needs to be a little. I don't need to compete with it. 78% of the time, when an NBA team wins their home game in the finals, they win. So the Nuggets might take home, if that current trend, if that history holds, the Nuggets for the first time in their 47-year history to become the NBA champs. Who you got? The Nuggets or the Heat? Let me know. In the NHL, the Panthers will be playing the Golden Knights. Who's going to get the Stanley Cup? We're going to soon find out. In the WNBA, the Liberty will be facing off against the Sky today at 5 p.m. The Suns 89, the Lynx 84. The Lynx will be playing the Mystics tomorrow. In Major League Baseball, the Twins 7, the Guardians 6, the Tigers will be facing off against the White Sox, and the Cubs will be facing off against the Padres out in beautiful San Diego. Going to get some closing thoughts from Otis, but before we do, I want you to remember that if you are a first-time home buyer,
Otis isn't here anymore. He hung up.
You have not owned a home within the past 3 years, you need to call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, your trusted local lender. First-time buyers made up only 26% of the marketplace last year, down from 34% the year before, and down from higher numbers over previous years. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have said, that's not good. You know, cornerstone of wealth development in America really is your home. That is your biggest asset. And if you don't have that, you don't have a whole lot. So they want to turn those numbers around by incentivizing first-time home buyers with substantially lower rates. Now, this program could change at any time because the rates could rise. So you need to call Team Hochberg so that you can take advantage of this program. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com. This is not a trick, everybody. If your total household income does not exceed, if you live in Chicago, and if it does not exceed $105,700, and you've not owned a home within the past 3 years, you could be eligible for this program. So call them and find out. Remember, you want to establish multi-generational wealth. Homeowners beget other homeowners who beget other homeowners, and on it goes generationally. So do something for you, do something for your children and their children, and so on and so forth. Call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. This is your opportunity to secure these low rates. I wish I'd gotten a chance to speak with you, Otis, but you know, I hope that you and more Black and others will be listening more next week. I don't want to step over anyone. I want to say this before we begin this segment. I don't like to sit high and look low. That's not my spirit at all. But I try to share things with you about some things that I've seen, some things that I've lived. So when we talk about Dr. King, of course, I remember him kind of out of the corner of my eye because I was a little girl and I was privileged enough to meet him. I remember when my father was about to go work for him, he took me on the plane with him to Atlanta. And my father and I used to travel with him a lot when I was a little girl before I, got involved in piano lessons and ballet and things like that. Started living my life, right? And I just remember Reverend James Bevel and Reverend C.T. Vivian and Reverend Dr. Wyatt T. Walker and Reverend Abernathy and Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth and Dorothy Cotton and so many people. These are the people I grew up with. These are the people who were with Dr. King in the tough times when no one wanted to be bothered with him. Dr. King was the most unpopular man in the United States of America. That is why it was easy to assassinate him. And it became easier because Black people, more than half of us, disapproved of him. He could not get in a Black pulpit, which is why they prevented Reverend Evans, Clay Evans, from finishing the construction on his church. No bank would lend him a dime, because Dr. King dared to confront Mayor Daley, and Mayor Daley used his power to shut the city down on Reverend Clay Evans. And instead of abandoning Reverend Evans, because Reverend Evans had given Dr. King his pulpit, we stayed with him, and the church grew and grew and grew. He just kept having to add services on Sunday. But we look at Dr. King as the icon, as the martyr, but the martyr was hated. Hated. He was the most hated man in America. It has been reported that the FBI office in Atlanta, when he was killed, erupted in cheers. J. Edgar Hoover sent tapes of him in personal situations with other women to his wife, hoping to destroy his marriage. Thank God his wife didn't fall for that. People have failings, all kinds of things. And they tried to get him to kill himself. The FBI. So when I talk to you, and so when we start talking about Dr. King and what he stood for with the LGBTQ community, for example, hold on, wait a minute. Because to have a Bayard Rustin working for him 60, 70 years ago was a revolutionary act. No one wanted to fool with Bayard Rustin either, because he was gay. I'm not telling you what I think, I'm telling you what I know. No one wanted to fool with a whole lot of people, and Dr. King fooled with all of them, all the folks who had leprosy, because he felt they had something to contribute. Yes, Dr. King absolutely fought for black people, but he fought for everyone. The beloved community was not the beloved black community. Black nationalism was for someone else. He fought for everyone. And I don't have a problem with black nationalists. I'm not mad. I ain't mad. I'm about it. But Dr. King saw a cancer at the heart of this society, at the heart of the world, that was militaristic, that was racist, that was materialistic. And you have black people who are white supremacists, as well as white people and indigenous people. A whole lot of people don't like black people. A whole lot of people don't like themselves. J. Edgar Hoover didn't like himself. And he was a cross-dressing homosexual who harassed homosexuals. He was a horrific human being. But hurt people hurt people. And I'm going to fight for fairness for everybody, from this microphone and every place I go. As I advocate for black people, you're not going to out-black me. It's not going to happen. But I know everybody can sing the blues. And if everybody starts singing the blues, then we can resolve our problems. So if you want to take me on and let's talk about it, call me. Let's do that. I want to do it. Because I want us to get well together, because I don't have all the answers. So, let us move forward, everybody. Big Pharma. Executives have mocked, this is what I mean. These are white people who have mocked white people who are poor as pillbillies. Not hillbillies, pillbillies. A town of 3,000 people gets millions of opioids dropped on them. Not in the black community, no, they already got us with crack. They got white folks with opioids. It's a horrific thing. So let's talk about this, because one of the families who did it, they're going to be able to hold on to their billions of dollars. And they're almost unsuable. I know that's not a word, but I'm just putting it out there. And so we've got Attorney C.K. Hoffler, former president of the National Bar Association. We've got Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil rights and civil liberties lawyer. We've got Attorney Darrell Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Indeed, there is no finer and bigger advocate for our voting rights than Darrell Jones and Barbara Arnwine in America Today. And of course, brilliant political strategist and organizer, Attorney Erin Connolly. Let me start with you, Chris McGreal. I have had you on this show before. I just think that you're absolutely brilliant, and I have to thank you for shining a light on this horror. His book, American Overdose, I urge you to get it. The opioid tragedy in 3 acts. He's a reporter with the Guardian newspaper. And I want you to react to what's happened with the Sacklers, or should I say what didn't happen with the Sackler family, who have owned the Purdue Pharmaceutical Company. Welcome back to the show, Chris McGreal.
Yes, good morning, Santita. I don't think it was any great surprise. This has been coming down the line for a while. But, it would seem that they've it pretty much got away with it. I mean, what you have, the kind of agreement that's now been finalized, allows the family, which made about, that nobody really knows for sure, but it's believed the Sacklers, or two branches of the Sackler family, based in the US and the UK, they made about $11 billion from OxyContin, which is really the drug that very, very high-powered, powerful opioid painkiller that kind of kick-started the opioid epidemic, because the company, Purdue Pharma, basically totally mismarketed it to large numbers of people as a safe and non-addictive drug. That kicks off the opioid epidemic, which is, in one form or another. I mean, it evolved over time from prescription painkillers to heroin and fentanyl, but it all begins with this drug. That's killed more than 1 million people now over the past couple of decades. So they've made about $11 billion out of it, and essentially the bankruptcy deal that's been agreed will see them pay about half of that, $5.5 to $6 billion of the profits in compensation. But the key thing here is that the agreement prevents them from being sued by anybody else. It puts an end to all civil litigation against the family. So it means that in essence they still walk away with several $1 billion. And in the eyes of some people, the agreement's even more egregious because they're actually allowed to pay this money over 9 years. So they will, in effect, actually be allowed to pay from the profits of the existing investments rather than actually just handing over a lump sum cash. And so that's the agreement. There are those who think that that's a good agreement in that at least it's going to get cash into the hands of those that need it reasonably soon, which is essentially the states, and some of it goes to the families of the victims. Other people think that essentially the Sacklers have been let off the hook.
What does it say to you that the Sacklers, essentially their wealth, which has been derived from so much of the pain of others, that their wealth has been protected, and that there are still so many barriers to suing these companies? I mean, the government established a fund, right, in 1986 that protects companies. They take the hit, but the companies don't.
Yeah, but it speaks to the power of corporations and I guess the uber wealthy families. I mean, to a lot of eyes, the very strange thing about this agreement is it's Purdue Pharma, their company, that is going into bankruptcy. The company that made OxyContin, the painkiller that caused all of these problems, that's gone into bankruptcy. And yet, as a side effect of that bankruptcy, the family, who have admitted no liability and who are not declaring bankruptcy, are protected from civil litigation. Some people see that as a misuse of that particular law. It wasn't intended when Congress wrote it to be used in that way, but it's not the first time it's been used in that way. But nonetheless, the Sacklers are being afforded protection from personal bankruptcy, even though if you look at some of the evidence that came out in the whole process, it appears that once it looked like Purdue Pharma was itself going to be held to account, be driven into bankruptcy itself, and that the family would probably lose the company, they then began transferring billions of dollars out of the company into their own accounts. Many of these are offshore accounts. And one of the reasons we don't know how much they're worth is we don't really know where all that money ended up, and they've never really told us. And part of the court battles over the years was trying to find out who got what money and where it went. So I think it all speaks to the power of not only big corporations, but very wealthy families to firstly drag this out, and secondly get a deal that obviously still protects a large chunk of what many people think is really just drug dealing money. That's all. If they were a Mexican cartel, they would not be protected in this way. But they're an American-British family, and they are.
No, that is too rich. I mean, a Mexican cartel, brown people, they're the problem. But this white family that has this multi-billion-dollar corporation, which has been allowed to go into bankruptcy. They're able to keep their billions. I mean, Chris McGreal, how is this supposed to work? I mean, the author of American Overdose, the opioid tragedy in 3 acts, how does this work? It just seems so unfair.
Yes, but I think if you look at one of the things about the origins of the opioid epidemic itself, and partly why it was allowed to run on for so long before anything was done about it, there are many factors there, including who were the early victims. But one of the other factors is the influence of big corporations on the government, on Congress, on federal regulation. You see the power of these corporations and how, in this particular case, not just Purdue Pharma, but other drug manufacturers kept the door open to the mass prescribing of opioids, even when it was perfectly evident what was going on. And one of the indicators is the United States is the only country to have had an opioid epidemic on this scale, in this sense. I mean, Canada has more recently dealt with it, but it's right next door, and it spills over. But in terms of a medically created opioid epidemic, it's only the United States, which I think speaks to the power of those corporations to influence medical policy, because it's a medical industry rather than being a public health service, and you see the effect. I will add that there's one area where the Sacklers haven't been able to influence so far, is that all of these agreements allow them to keep their billions. It allows them to not be sued in civil cases, but it doesn't stop criminal investigations. And there are criminal investigations of individual members of the Sackler family who were very heavily involved, particularly Dr. Richard Sackler was the forefront of pushing this policy. They are under investigation, and criminal charges may yet emerge.
We're speaking with Chris McGreal and this tremendous panel about the Sackler family. The Purdue Pharmaceutical Company has gone into bankruptcy, but not before the Sacklers made billions upon billions, and as the company did, off of distributing opioids. How is it that a city, or excuse me, a little hamlet of 3,000 people can get millions of opioid pills poured into it? How is it that this book, American Overdose, the opioid tragedy in 3 acts, really, really takes you through this opioid tragedy, how it happened? The docuseries, it's a 2-part docuseries, The Crime of the Century. Indeed, they say that this crisis has been manufactured, and why? Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. 773-763-9278. I do hope that you will join us at the Rainbow Push International Conference, July 15th through the 19th, July 15th through the 19th, here in Chicago. Please go to rainbowpush.org, rainbowpush.org, and call 773-FREEDOM so you can get more information. Everybody, I caution you, as we talk on this chat line, do not insult anyone, and do not make comments that are racially insensitive. That is unacceptable here. And just for the record, people trying to lighten their race and trying to get blonde and all of that, as I'm seeing people with blonde hair on top of my head today. Everybody's trying to lighten the race, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I mean, so let's just stop that. But don't insult people. If you disagree with someone, disagree with them without being disagreeable. But insulting people is unacceptable. There are other platforms where you can do that, but you won't do it here. That will get you blocked. I've not blocked anyone, but I'll block anyone who's disrespectful to anyone here. Stay right here with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Okay, everybody, I've had a morning. Woo, these folks are getting me going before I go get my hair done. Let me do a rundown. Thank you, Chris, for being with us. Stay right here. Attorney C.K. Hoffler. Okay, everybody come off mute. Attorney Darrell Jones.
Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning. Attorney Mark Fancher.
Good morning.
Attorney Aaron Connolly.
Good morning, everyone.
Good. Is Attorney Hoffler still there?
Yep, I'm
Okay.
here. I'm at the airport, but I'm here.
Okay,
Yep.
very good. Well, we're going to go to Attorney Fancher, and then we're going to get to you, and because I want to get everybody in so they can respond to what they've heard. There's just so much. I've had Chris McGreal on this show many times, and I'm always so honored when he's able to join us because he's done such brilliant work and so much investigating of the genesis of this opioid crisis. And I think it's just something we need to talk about. Because we watched drugs dropped into the black community, CK and Mark and Aaron. Yeah.
And Santita, I was gonna say it is the fastest growing issue in our community now. You know, I represent the city of Flint and their opioid litigation. So this opioid crisis dominates our community, plagues our community. It may have started in certain white communities, but it is something that is taken over in our community. So that's just a perspective that we definitely need to share with the listeners.
Well,
it's really it's awful.
Well, you know, because they're saying that it's a manufactured crisis, and that appears to be so. And you know, we have to talk about it.
Like tobacco. Yeah, it's like tobacco. It's just like the tobacco issue. Exactly.
It is. I think this though too. This is Shanina, so I actually stepped
Dr.
on
Knighton.
Yes, Dr. Knighton. Just the fact, so I was just from the nursing perspective. So I've been a nurse
2 minutes.
for some time now and can tell you that saying that pain is whatever the patient says it is has gotten a lot of nurses written up because we knew. Even having to give the stuff on the units, like on the actual floor where we know a patient is being dosed up too much. But that saying of whatever a patient tell us it is has gotten us in a lot of trouble because we have actually been made to give medications even when we knew that it was not in the patient's best interest. And when you think about just that within itself of doing an assessment and somebody saying to rate pain on a level of 0 to 10 and we knowing the effect of the meds, we knowing what's going to happen when we're giving somebody OxyContin and we're knowing what kind of rush or high that they're going to feel, and it might not necessarily be physical pain, but someone literally writing you up because you're saying, I don't want to give this patient this med, or a patient actually getting you in
60 seconds.
Don't want to give that medication. And so it's so many different layers to it. And so when it was brought up in regards to legislation, that's one of the biggest issues that I will tell you going back is how do we evaluate pain, what's classified as pain, and what was classified to be able to send somebody home with a 30-day supply for pain that was only going to last a day, pain that was only going to last a week, or something that they needed to work through. So
back in 30.
I tell you, we saw this coming, and the more that you had healthcare providers that opened up about it, said something about it, there was a significant amount of pushback.
So can I leap in here, Santita, and just say that
yes, I got 20 seconds.
That policy that she's describing, the pain as the fifth vital sign, essentially Purdue wrote and pushed that policy into the hospitals, made it central.
Would you all mind putting that out? Just very briefly give us that.
We can change the world.
I want you all to have the interchange before I go pivot to Mark. Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. I hope that you will be there. We'll be having conversations about the migrants who are being dumped all over the country, just like opioids were dumped all over the country. We've got Chris McGreal, of course, reporter for The Guardian, and you've got to get his book, American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts, of course. Attorney C.K. Hoffler is about to get on a plane, Court TV, Rainbow Push chair, and the former president of the National Bar Association, Attorney Darrell Jones, chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian and civil rights lawyer, and Attorney Aaron Connolly. But we've got Dr. Shanina Knighton, who always wants to stick around and hear what's going on so she can make a comment. But as a registered nurse, in addition to being an infection preventionist. You said something really interesting during the break, and Chris McGreal was responding to you. So I want everybody to hear what you said. You said that oftentimes, I guess, people are over-medicated, over-prescribed. They're given 30 pills when they might need 2, and, a pain that might last 2 days, they get 30 days of meds for it. Would you explain?
Yes, that is correct. And so as what Chris was saying in regards to pain being the 5th vital sign, essentially as a nurse, our responsibility would be to carry out a doctor's orders. So if a physician put in that this patient is to, let's say, get, Oxycontin, or oxycodone or Percocet, any of those, if they were saying like, hey, you're to get this every 4 hours and you're supposed to also get, let's say, some hydromorphone for some breakthrough pain, we might know physically after assessing that patient that is way too much for that patient. However, when you would get, let's say, a physician on the phone, or when you would get someone in the room to say that this is too much, or tell a patient that is too much, they've already experienced that euphoria or that high, and you would actually get in trouble for not giving them that medication, either by the physician themselves, or it would end up resulting in, let's say, poor patient satisfaction scores, which we know was driving or still is driving a lot of the care in America. So when someone says pain is that 5th vital sign, that's literally ranking, asking them to subjectively rank their pain on a level of a 0 to 10. And sometimes that pain may not necessarily be attributed to what's physically going on. It can be other roots of pain. But because we only have that scale to go off of, and it's what the patient says it is, that ends us in a situation of are we and have we adequately assessed pain? And so he was mentioning from the policy side, and I'll let him take it from there.
Chris McGreal?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And I heard it from so many nurses and doctors. I heard it from the chief surgeon at Detroit General, who told me that he'd been hauled before an ethics committee after 40 years of doing surgery because it had been deemed that he wasn't giving enough painkillers to people after surgery, which he deemed to be dangerous for them. He said that you don't want to be giving people immediately after surgery too much morphine because they don't move around and they don't recover. But this idea took hold that people should be pain-free, that they had to be given as much painkiller as possible to kill pain. And this whole concept of pain as the 5th vital sign essentially was pushed into the hospitals by Purdue Pharma as part of its marketing strategy, to get doctors to prescribe as many opioids as possible, not only to kill pain, but as the first kind of step towards killing pain, as the initial treatment, even when, as you've just heard, often pain doesn't immediately come from causes that are treatable by opioids. But that idea took over in the hospitals, and medical staff were punished for not adhering to it.
Mark Fancher, why don't you react to what you're hearing? Millions of opioid pills dumped on a town in West Virginia of 3,000 people. The evidence is becoming clear that this has been a manufactured crisis, but it's been a deadly one nonetheless. And then this family, they're protected. Their wealth is protected. Mark Fancher.
Well, you started this segment by talking about Dr. King, and it is unusual for the forces the powerful forces to resort to assassination. They only do it when they determine that an individual is incorruptible, that they can't in some way persuade them to leave the path that they're on, to in some way endorse what the powerful are doing. And Dr. King was a completely and totally honest man, as was Malcolm X. And they had to resort to that. And he was honest in the sense that he did not try and deceive himself. He did not try and look at situations in this country and persuade himself that the things that he was seeing would require him to do uncomfortable things, and therefore he would, in some way, persuade himself that the problem really isn't what he saw. And what he understood clearly is that there was a class problem in the United States of America, and it cut across racial lines. That certainly, emerging from the black community, he felt a responsibility and an obligation to lead them. But toward the end of his life, the Poor People's Campaign was one that recognized that powerful forces, multinational corporations, the government, and others were in many ways abusing the poor, regardless of their racial identity. And so when he was mobilizing for the Poor People's Campaign, he didn't limit his mobilization to black communities. He went to the so-called reservations for indigenous peoples. He went to the barrios for the Latinos. And he went to Appalachia, which is what we're talking about today. And he mobilized poor whites because he understood that they, too, were the targets of all of this type of exploitation. But what's also present in this historical exploitation and manipulation and the efforts to cause pain for poor whites is a racial element, which has in many ways provided them with a perspective that dissuades them from forming the type of alliance that Dr. King was fighting for. They have always been persuaded that somehow their interests are more closely aligned with these pharmaceutical companies and the big corporations and these wealthy families, that somehow their connection is stronger with them than it is with other poor people of different races. And so even in this opioid crisis, you see a racial distinction that's been made. When black people endured the crack, the crack epidemic, which was perpetrated by the U.S. government, as Gary Webb made clear, then they were regarded as pariahs. They were regarded as criminals. Their drug use and the heroin use that preceded it were criminalized. When the opioid crisis broke out in white communities, white working-class communities across the Midwest, the Rust Belt, and in other places, then it became a health issue. It became a health problem. It wasn't simply based on enduring notions of white supremacy. In many ways, it was manipulative because it distinguished these people from people of color and sent a very subtle message that still their interests are more closely aligned with white power than they are with people of color. And so, this whole thing is insidious. It is something that is just so offensive that it affirms and reaffirms my conviction that capitalism as a system is Satan's system. But corporations, major corporations, are not just immoral, but totally amoral. For them to cynically dump these types of drugs into a community without any thought whatsoever as to what the consequences are going to be on a human level, without any thought whatsoever as to what the impact would be on the broader society, is beyond unconscionable. And it's a testament to the extent of their power that they have, even when they're under fire, when there have been many, many lawsuits that have been filed against them because of their crimes, and I'm going to call them crimes, that they somehow have been able to, through the sheer weight of their power, to emerge from all of this with the protection of the court. Now, I don't know the nitty-gritty and the nuts and bolts of the cases that have been pending and what's going on in the bankruptcy court. But typically, the bankruptcy court is intended to be an institution that stands between a debtor and all of its creditors. When a debtor is in trouble and creditors are howling at the door, trying to get whatever it is that the debtor has, the bankruptcy court intervenes and says, everybody stand back. I, as the court, am going to figure out what becomes of the debtor's assets. And it is usually intended to try and do justice, to ensure that, on the one hand, the debtor is protected, but on the other hand, to ensure that to the extent that the creditors can be made whole, that they are. But it looks, just from looking at this superficially, that what the bankruptcy court has done is to become the advocate for, this family, and to the detriment of many people who probably have unresolved claims that really should be heard. And so it is, it is a great frustration to me personally, not just that this happened, because we've seen so much of this happen in the past, but the frustration for me is the fact that so many people in this country have failed to see it, and not only have failed to see it, have refused to see it. And because they do, they become subject to demagoguery. They become subject to all of these messages that are sent out by right-wing forces that cause them not to sit back and say, they dumped crack in the black community, and now they dumped opioids in the white community. The same people did it. The same forces did it. So maybe we should join forces with them and go after the corporate world, go after the capitalists. Instead of saying that, they continue to point fingers at communities of color. They continue to mobilize and do things like January 6th. And when they do that, it frustrates any potential that there might be for us to really wage a full-scale attack on the forces of power in this country, which have caused so much misery for so many people of all colors.
CK, before you jump on the plane?
Yes, Santita, there's probably noise in the background. So this is an issue that I know a lot about because I am involved in opioid litigation on behalf of the city of Flint. So this is one of the fastest growing epidemics, if you will, in the black community. So this is not something that's limited to non-black communities. This is right here and there. In fact, has been in our community forever. When we talk about the heroin addiction, we know that heroin is an opioid. People don't realize that. All of these new opioids that, by the way, were designed to cure or to get rid of cancer pain. That's how powerful they are. If you have ever had a C-section, if you've ever had, you've been in an accident, and you went to the hospital and you're prescribed something, typically you were prescribed an opioid. They're highly addictive. There's some that say it's more addictive than crack cocaine. So this is an epidemic, a pandemic from my standpoint. And the litigation against these defendants, in our litigation, we sued 22 defendants, including, of course, Big Pharma, all of those that were involved in the marketing, the production of the opioids. And now the litigation, the trend is no longer to sue the doctors, because the doctors, some of them were duped too. But years ago, doctors used to have what we call pill mills, where they would just prescribe pills, and you never even had to appear in person. You could get the prescription over the phone. It was really a racket. So this litigation that's happening now is necessary litigation. It is, of course, distasteful, distressing, and disgusting that the owners of these companies are getting off and that the companies are filing for bankruptcy protection. But that's what happened. And we saw this in tobacco litigation, and I did tobacco litigation. So I'm not surprised, but despite that, there still is justice to be had, because there will be settlements that these cities will be able to get, and the monies will filter down for programs to help the victims of this opioid epidemic. And it is real. Everything from the police department, the EMS, the health services, the hospitals, on a county, city, on all levels, they are all engaged in dealing with the opioid crisis on a real level. The churches in our community, very engaged, because when people are strung out and it's just as bad as a crack or worse, the churches, the faith community, steps in with those families. So this has impacted every single aspect of the African American community. As I said, it's an epidemic, going to be a pandemic pretty soon, and we don't need to underestimate the significance. There are many people that are misguided into believing that this is only a crisis in the Appalachians and in rural areas with a predominantly white communities. That is inaccurate, and it is something that we need to recognize in our community, because this is right now one of the greatest health challenges that we are confronting. And it's confronting many people on different economic levels.
Absolutely. 40 years ago, it's opioids right now. And it's just numbing people out. In fact, one of the prisoners who was exchanged, for Brittany Griner, went on Russian television in a big interview and said, you don't have to worry about Americans having a revolution because they're too drugged up to do it. Okay? Sober, educated people. And I'm not saying degrees. No, I'm saying sober people who are literate and who study. They lead revolutions. That's why having public education is so important in America. Having people read, having people explore ideas and ideals. You need to see what's happening. I've got a couple of minutes for you, Aaron. I'm sorry we're running through, but boy, we've had a lot going on this morning. But Aaron, a couple of minutes for you. Is Aaron still there? Okay, well then let me pivot to you, Attorney Darrell Jones.
Yes, thanks, Santita. You know, in listening to all that's being said, and I think about the Sackler family and how they've made their fortunes off the Oxycontin and all that has gone into it. I mean, it's complete manipulation, right? They did manipulation to talk about the approval process from the FDA and what was involved. They did manipulation to talk about the distribution of this drug that they were pushing out into Appalachia. You know, they did manipulation even now that we're dealing with the bankruptcy portion of it, so that they can individually not have the liability, and they're getting immunity because of for future acts against them. So it really is, you know, very upsetting to watch $11 billion being made, seeing the catastrophe that's just ripped across this country with all these families that have been impacted by it. What was the number? Some near 1 million Americans killed from 2019 as a result of this drug that's been, you know, marketed wholesale like this. So to hear, to see, to watch as this family appears to walk away from this, and with this whole trail of bodies behind them, dead bodies behind them, that is just so incredibly upsetting. And then to hear that in their culture of the Purdue farmer, they're referring to them as pillbillies. To hear that they're, you know, referring to and telling their sales consultants, teaching them to tell the lies so that they can push the drug out and get greater money and more people addicted to it. It's very upsetting. And they should be held criminally responsible. They should be held criminally responsible. Because we know that the small people that are on the ground, the few clients that I've had that have been addicted or pushing or selling or whatever, the few pills, they're going to prison. But these people that push it out there in the first place and they're going addicted, they're not. That's troublesome. That's bothersome.
Chris McGreal, the last 4 minutes belong to you. Because it just, where do you see this going? I mean, because just where do you see this going? I mean, because it's, I mean, will people be able to sue? I mean, is there any justice here for people who've been caught up in an addiction cycle that was manufactured for them, and a crisis that has been manufactured?
Well, I certainly wouldn't call it justice. I mean, there's a degree of financial compensation for the families of those who died or people who became addicted, but it's not huge under the circumstances. The maximum payout will be $48,000. And it could be as low as $3,500. And, you know, over the years, I've spoken to so many people who've lost loved ones, you know, spouses, children, parents, and, you know, we now have a generation of children who were raised in homes where addiction was very prevalent, and that's had a knock-on effect on their lives, and some of them have fallen into addiction. So that, you know, I don't think there's any real sense of justice at all. I think the other thing that's striking to me is I really don't think the lessons of this epidemic have been learned. Mm-hmm. Yes, there will be, you know, there have been attempts to limit the prescribing of opioids, but the United States still prescribes at a rate much higher than other countries, still sending, you know, young people who've had their wisdom teeth pulled out with, you know, days of hydrocodone and things, which is completely unnecessary. And I don't think in terms of federal regulation, the failings, we haven't really talked about the failings of the FDA and all of this, but it did fail enormously. I don't think that we've learned the structural lessons of why this happened in the United States, why the drug industry was so powerful in deciding medical policy. Essentially, they wrote medical policy on the prescribing of opioids. Essentially, they sold the idea to the medical profession that opioids were the first step in treating pain, which no other country pursues that as a policy. And so I think all of those things, while there have been efforts to change that and shift perspective and all of that, I think more broadly the structural problems, power of industry over policy, all of those things, I don't really think those lessons have been learned, and it wouldn't surprise me if somewhere down the line we see something similar with another drug.
Wow. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot to think about, everybody. But, be aware. Be aware. We've had a lot of ground that we've had to cover today, and I'm so glad that we've been able to do it. Some people have said that I have unfollowed them. I don't do that. I don't need to do that. I'm not passive aggressive. I'm aggressive. If I have an issue with you, I will tell you, and that is it. But I just want you to know that I try to come from a place of love during this show. I have seen people do some things that are pretty mean-spirited. And my family and I have been on the receiving end of a lot of it. So when God gave me the opportunity to be here, I decided that I really wanted to do this a particular way. I realize this is an aggressive space, talk radio. It's a male-dominated space. And you don't see a lot of women in it, unfortunately. But I bring you a perspective that is born of my lived experience. And I want to have a conversation with people. And I don't want to condescend to people. I don't want to exclude people. And what I've lived in my life, I want to share with you. And I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm always going to try to do it from a place of respect. I'm human. I make mistakes. I have my failings just like everybody else has. But I have really tried to come to you from a place of love and a place of respect. And that is my requirement here. I require. I don't ask. I require that you be respectful of each other and you be respectful of me, and I require that of myself toward you. And we're going to do that. I do believe in intersectionality. I believe at the end of the day, we're all under the same boot. We just don't know it. That's something Dr. King came to understand, and thank you, Mark, for your explanation, your wise and learned explanation of what Dr. King was experiencing. Dr. King could not get into a black pulpit. A black minister here, one of the most prominent in America, moved the entrance of his church from Martin Luther King Drive to the side entrance so the address of his church would not have to carry Dr. King's name. Don't you tell me about the mean-spirited things that black people can do to each other. I will not be a part of that. And I'm not going to be mean toward anyone else. I won't do it. I will come from a place of love, or I will not be here. I love you, everybody. Have a great weekend. I'll see you on Keep Up Alive on Sunday. Chris McGreal, thank you for the work that you have been doing, standing up for these voiceless people. American Overdose, everybody. American Overdose. Get the book. It's the opioid tragedy in 3 acts. You need to see how we got here. I love you, everybody. Thank you, Henry, for a great show. I love you, WCPT and AM 950 Radio. Have a great, great weekend. See you on Keep Up Alive on Sunday. And hopefully, God willing, here on Monday. God bless. Is anyone still here? Anyone?
I am.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say before I have to run? Mark, are you still here? Did everyone leave? Did everybody go? Everybody go. Is there anything you'd like to say before we go? I'm glad you stayed.
I'm just it was a really good show. Can
you imagine they were called pillbillies? Pillbillies?
Yeah.
Like what?
But but I think to your point, we look at more stuff that actually connects us instead of what separates us. We get we go further. And I think that's the big thing. And I can see you having treated white, black, all kinds of patients. I love what CK said. And that was just the whole fact that when we think about, let's say, a drug such as hydromorphone, that contains like one of the major ingredients of heroin. And so it's legal, you know, inside of hospital settings, but it's illegal if it's called heroin and it's out in the community. And so we don't think about if somebody has that addictive effect inside of the hospital, what is it going to be when they go home? So I really appreciated the conversation today and where it went, and just, you know, even learn some things myself in regards to where legislation came from.
Oh, I mean, I just want people to know. And next week we'll be talking about the migrants. We'll be talking about that more, and we're going to be talking about all of it. And we need to talk about this because you see some people, I told you, imprisoning people, putting people on trial, it's a political act. Everybody doesn't get to trial. And then folks who get to trial, you can see from the corruption on the Supreme Court, you can't trust this stuff. You can't trust this.
It's almost like I need to slap you on the wrist and put you in a public eye, but I'm not really going to do about it.
Girl, give me a break. Dr. King lived under IRS audit all of his public life. And very powerful forces that run this country and the world have been implicated in his death. He was killed a year to the day, to the minute that he gave his anti-Vietnam speech. It was okay when he was fighting for desegregation. He didn't fight for integration, he fought for desegregation. But when he faced the military-industrial complex, which is odorless, colorless, and now they have black people heading up the military-industrial complex so they can run over the world. Be careful when they put a black person in charge. Because you do much...
That's the truth.
Oh, yeah. You do much mess under the cover of darkness. Okay? So I don't get excited about the first, only I'm like, oh, boy, who are they going to hurt now?
But sometimes, just to your point, you got to serve a God that sit high and look low.
Look, and that's why I try to relate to people a particular way. Because my skin is my skin. It's not something I worship. I don't worship white skin. I don't worship any skin. Because God gave it all to us. There was something called Pangea at the beginning of the world. We were all one continent. And Daniel Perez makes the point. Everybody's an American here, from north, middle, and south. Venezuelans are Americans. Yeah, Brazilians are Americans. Yeah, they are. The only people in America, only Americans are not white. And the only Americans are not residents of the United States or citizens of the United States. And the only people who count are not us. Whoever you are. We're all God's children. God promised you a seat at the table in the presence of your enemy because your enemy is God's child too. Check that.
Yeah.
My father checked me on, my brother Jesse and I used to get into it all the time. After a point, he said, baby, you know what? I think you need to check yourself because there's something in you that's very much like him. And there's something like him there's something in him that's very much like you. So yeah, I saw him being a little aggressive. Now I'm like, no, you need to work this out. Because they have all the people who are living up under the boot fighting with each other. And it's a false choice. While the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. You can't get your public schools adequately funded. But the Pentagon and militarism take up 62% of our budget. You're not mad about that? All of the Western United States was indigenous, and now the indigenous people speak Spanish. That's who they are. These people are coming home. It's called El Norte. So just stop, y'all. Just stop. And even if they don't fight for me, I got it. But I'm gonna try and be right.
Yes, as you should. And it was an emotionally driven show today, but I will tell you, my classic line today is, you're not going to out-black me.
Boom.
So I'm just telling you to use that one.
Now, why do you want to make me sound like I'm crazy? I did say it, though.
It wasn't.
And I add more to it.
It was just such a classic.
Yeah. Now, before we go, because we're still on the air, why did you like that line? You just want me to act nut. That's what it is. Why'd you like this? You're not.
Well, because the history. So when you have that history that's there, and and what I call it's not history when it's firsthand knowledge. And so sometimes, I think that tends to be ignored. And so the thing is we tend to, and I'm saying we as a people, tend to go off of what we believe to be historically the fact, but that's based off of what we were told. And you already know how that story goes telephone, right?
Yeah.
Where this person said this is what happened, but your lived experience is your lived experience. And I think that's what came through today of, no, let me tell you what actually happened and let me tell you how it happened, which I think had a different connotation. And I understood what the viewer was trying to say, but he wasn't articulating it very well. And that was just the fact that you cannot change skin color. And it's not to say that sexuality can't be, but that's something outwardly that we have to wear that we can't hide. That
Absolutely.
We can't do anything about. And so he didn't do a good job articulating that, but I understood what he said when he talked about equality and just talked about the different historical things that may have occurred.
But I did too, because the white gay community still does not stand with us on our issues. And I take issue with them on that. And I say it. But I'm still going to stand with you on being disrespected. I'm still going to stand with you on being treated unjustly. I'm still going to do it. But I'm real clear. I'm clear. You on one level, you can't talk to me. That's why my issue with the trans community. Unless you're going to talk to me about the wealth gap, and you're going to roll up on me as a woman, and black and indigenous women have to work an extra year to make what a white man makes. Mm-hmm. Black women have to work 10 months more. Hispanic women have to work 11 months more. No, you can't talk to me. You ain't talking to me. Mm-hmm. Those are my issues. I had a woman who was a cashier at the Jewel grocery store. They cut her SNAP benefits by $100, and she can't buy the food in the store. You aren't going to talk about that? While women still are not making the money the men make? I don't want to hear it. My issue is not lipstick, MAC, and getting my hair done. My issue is milk, money, or mortgage. Mm-hmm. So if you want to talk to me and you want to be me, then be that. Because that's what I got to talk about. If you want to talk about Dr. King, because my father made $75 a week. I went to the Singer Sewing School to learn to sew because I had to sew some of my clothes when I was growing up. Don't you talk to me. I had to earn a full scholarship to college because my mother said, look, I need you to pay because money's tight. And you know what? She didn't say it like I said, look, if one of these, if the bottom drops out, that is, if one of these assassinations takes roots, I need you to pay for college. And I know you can do it. That's my lived experience. Boom.
Yes,
it is what it is. And you want to talk about Dr. King, the most hated man in America? No, darling. You ain't going to do that. Because nobody stood with him. Nobody. And you wouldn't have stood with him because he would not have been black enough for you. That's what irritates me about that. Because that group used to call Dr. King DeLawd. D-E-L-A-W-D. They mocked him.
Wow.
Yeah. So no, I lived that. And you want to talk about Fred Hampton and the Panthers? Fred Hampton was a threat to the establishment because he engaged in rainbow politics. This is someone I met. So come on now.
Should I get my notebook out?
You want to talk about this? Let's talk about it.
Exactly.
So look, I'm gonna run, but I want you to say what you got to say, and then I'm gonna get on out of here. And just so you know, Chicago News 101, you were not blocked. I don't have a lot of lines to call into, and I had people on the line. I don't block. I don't need to block people. That's too much energy. I don't need to do that, and I'm not afraid of you. I wouldn't be in this space if I were afraid of you. I would not be in this space if I didn't love you, even if you don't like me. That's all right with me. I'm accustomed to it. I'm accustomed to people not liking me. I'm accustomed to people saying they're going to bomb our house. I got to leave in the middle of the night. I get it all. They've been white, they've been black, they've been brown, they've been yellow, they've been red. I get it. Okay? I'm over that. So you can feel any way about me you want to. I'm fine with that. And I am a woman who stands up for women, period. And I'm gonna stand up for men too, because I'm that girl who loves our men. I'm not a man hater, but I'm gonna tell you what, I'm not gonna let a man roll up on me and treat me like I'm less than God, less than him, because God made me, and made me last. I don't have the missing rib. You do. You need me.
That's it.
I'm completely lacking in nothing. No. You ain't gonna just roll up on me. As a woman, no, I don't do that. I don't need to kiss your feet. No, I don't need to do any of that. We ain't doing that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not from that kind of background. My father said, I don't want you to be beholden to a man or his money. I want you to be a strong, independent woman who can be interdependent, because independence precedes interdependence. I don't want you to be needy for a man. I want you to need one. I don't want you to be needy for your family or needy for me. I want you to need me. There's a difference. Neediness comes from a place of lack. Need comes from a place of abundance. Understanding that we need each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's godly. Everything else is coming out of your pain. I ain't doing that.
I agree. And so that's why I will echo again, it was a beautiful show, and I think just that acknowledgement of different levels, is one of the things, that's there that has to prevail. And you said it perfect, in regards to messaging and what's important to people. And even when you think about feminism, the fact that a black woman as a feminist would differ, from what a white feminist woman would look at. Yeah, exactly. And nothing's wrong with that. It doesn't invalidate, our issues and what's important. It doesn't. It just means that we all have differences, and being able to respect those differences and the passion that we all have to make things more equitable when people are trying to make them more inequitable. And so there's so much more stuff that actually bridges us together and separates us.
That's right.
But I know you have to run. I love you. It was a wonderful show. I love you too. And I greatly appreciated the dialogue and learning. Oh, yeah. Trust me, let's always learn something.
But I'm going to call you back real quick. But I'm going to jump off of here so I can, because I got a car waiting for me downstairs. But I love you.
Okay.
I'm going to call you right back.
I love you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Love y'all. See you on Sunday. Or tomorrow at Push. All right. And broadcast. Let me do this.